It was obvious to me that nutrition was having this monumental impact on health and that it was something we could change. It's quite hard to change your socioeconomic status, who your parents are, the pollution you're exposed to in the city you live in. So for me, it's like, okay, this is a thing that we can give people power over themselves. So calories for individuals is just very flawed. Calories tell you nothing about food quality. Young women, they are scared of food. They're not just that they want to be thin. It's more than that, actually. And they're really suffering with their health.
So I know you're going to love today's episode and you're going to want to watch because I know you care about your health. And my guest today is dedicated to that, Dr. Federica Amati. She's a medical scientist, public health expert, and a nutritionist who has dedicated her career to helping people not only live longer, but healthier and more vibrant lives, right? The quality of those years. And we're going to dive deep. We dive deep into the biggest mistakes people make, the common ones with their health, the real power of food beyond just calories, and how science-backed nutrition can transform your energy, your sleep, and even your longevity. Dr. Amati has an incredible way. She takes these complex topics and breaks them out into practical, doable steps that can truly change your life. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by health advice, I know it's coming from all directions, or confused about what's actually good for you, or you just want to feel your best every day, this episode is for you. So stick around because you're going to walk away with powerful science-backed insights that you can start using immediately. You get into this field and it feels like we know more than ever. We have more resources. And I have a friend, I've talked about this a lot, where he talks about our biology is set up there to keep us to survive. It's not there to help us thrive. Mm-mm. And so we live in this world that is, I think, in so many ways against our biology. It just is. And so you have to do all this weird stuff just to be kind of a mainline healthy.
Yeah.
It's they never have to think about it before. It was like, I looked at the fire, I looked at the sun, I ate whatever we could get our hands on. We walked around all day, we did work, we went to bed when it was dark. Okay. Yeah. And then you probably a lot of times died a lot earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're at this place where we have so much information and we've never been, more unhealthy for you and where you're at. If you said, okay, I'm going to approach this in a triage sort of approach, or I have one bullet in the chamber. Let's do one shot. Where does it start for most people? The most effective thing they could do to really support a better health. Let's not even say longevity. Let's just say higher quality of health.
Yeah. And you know what? I love that question. And I love that you asked the longevity piece, because the longevity has actually been delivered to us by medicine and hygiene. So the reason we're not dying at 38 or whatever age, like younger than that, is because we have way less child mortality. Like children used to die all the time, but below the age of 5. And thanks to hygiene practices, thanks to vaccinations that work, thanks to things that have kept them alive, antibiotics, right, when they're needed, we live longer. And once you get past 5, then it's actually easier to live for a while. And so hygiene and medicine have helped us to stretch that out past also 60 or so, right? But now where we're at, it's like, okay, that's worked well, great. Life expectancy's gone up, but we actually haven't increased our health span. Our health span still sits around 60, but we're expected to live to 86-ish. So we're living 20 odd years in poor health. No one wants that though. So for me, the obvious thing now, if you speak to a sleep specialist, they'll be like, well, it's sleep. If you speak to someone who's an exercise physiologist, they'll be like, well, it's exercise, right? So obviously, as a nutritionist, I'm going to say, well, I think food is the key for health span
I think
extension.
An exercise physiologist would agree with that.
Yeah,
I think when you really start going deep.
So, but the reason I say that is, so there's a couple of things, right? Because when we have an approach to food, which is more similar to how we evolved. So I love talking about this, because if we look at how we evolved, we used to spend all our days looking for food, moving around, looking for food. Then we'd find it and be like, yeah, we found some food. Bring it back to our tribe. share that food, talk to each other about how we found the food, and then draw pictures on the cave walls of how we found the food. And then like that was our life, right? So what I think is, now I'm not suggesting that we're, by the way, like returning to caveman era, but we've moved so far from that so quickly to the point where now convenience trumps actually spending time preparing food, sharing it with people you love, and spending that itself is a key part of diet. So one of the things that the Mediterranean diet is a diet I talk about the most. It's the most well evidenced. It's the most well understood. We don't like. It's there. It's very evidence based, and it has been been shown to improve markers across the board, in all age groups, in all populations. So it's one of those things where it's like there's really no good reason not to do it. What's interesting on the Mediterranean diet is that the base of it, the base of the pyramid, is conviviality. That's the base. And we've removed that from the way we interact with food. So now it's like grab and go, drink your lunch, or don't eat at all, and then get an IV drip. What? No. That's not how we evolved to live. And so whilst medicine and hygiene have helped us to extend longevity, so moved in the right direction, we're moving in the opposite direction to health in terms of how we interact with our environment. And in that I include food, because our environment is very much about how we get food and how we consume it and in what context. So why I think food is so important is because of the actual composition of the food itself and what it does for us, but also because it helps us to connect socially and because it helps us to be in the present. If you're cooking something, that's all you're doing, right? If you're cooking a meal, it gives you just a minute to do that thing. So it gives you a moment of just like A plus B equals C. Like it's a very complete cycle.
Yeah, you're
and
working
we thrive
it out.
with that. So humans love to complete things. And cooking is such a great example of, you make an omelette. It's like you've product, end result, great. Yeah. So there's a lot of benefits to eating well that's actually outside of the micro and macronutrient content of the food.
I have a daughter who, my middle daughter is a very, very good cook. She's really, some people are confident and intuitive and they playful and it works.
It's great.
And she loves to please, when she puts food down in front of somebody. But there's something else that you said, which was I watch her organize her life and understanding of what needs to get done first. And she's been learning that through cooking. So if you have 10 people coming over for dinner and they're going to be there in an hour and a half, all of a sudden, the oven has to go on first. What's going to take the longest? I better work on that first. So even using food as a way, preparation of food to develop a sense of order and not getting overwhelmed by, oh my God, 10 people are coming. But what do I need to do first? What happens next? Where do I need to move? And I thought it was really interesting because I'd never thought about it. For somebody she's very kind of creative and works that way. This was a way that she learned order and systematizing. So she was getting all of that through cooking food.
That's amazing.
It was a byproduct. So you still see people. Do you call them patients?
So I work with a multidisciplinary team of medics, psychotherapists. So we call them patients because they're in our clinic.
Okay. Yeah. If there were 5 things that seem to be a hurdle for people, is it the resource of time or money or is it lack of information? Is it laziness? Because, listen, I always say I wish somebody would show up the cutting fairy, and cut all my veggies up for me. Then I'm good, because sometimes you're like, really?
Can't be bothered.
One more time, Does that vegetable need to? No, we can leave that one out today.
Chunky chops.
Yeah, we're good. They don't like to cook. They're scared to cook. I know a lot of people get intimidated, like somebody in their life scared them out of the kitchen. I have friends like that. Their mother scared them out of the kitchen, whatever. What are the things that show up or not only convenience, but that other type of food that you pop in the microwave can be addictive.
Yeah.
So you have that, and it's certainly satisfying because it has all the sugar and all the stuff. So when you see people over and over, what are the hurdles that seem to be pretty universal?
Yeah. Do you know, there are some really big themes, but they vary a lot between men and women.
Really?
Yeah. And then within women, the age groups that I work with, there's some big themes. And then the other, like I do a lot of clinical work. It's private practice. These are people who can afford that care, which is a subset of people. But when I work with community groups through Imperial College, so I teach at Imperial College Medical School now, which is a nice 360. No, well, it's great that, so teaching those students teaches me a lot.
Yeah.
And then working through the networks that they do with communities, very different problems there. So the themes are like, if for people who in these community groups, a lot of them don't have access to money, they don't have access to food choice, English is not their first language, they've lost their community because they've emigrated and moved to the UK. And there it's honestly like just a lack of access to their traditional foods that would have been extremely healthy actually a lot of the time. So, which then means that they end up purchasing convenience foods and living off those and not having the understanding that they're terrible for them. So there's one example.
Genuinely not having the understanding?
Yeah, that genuinely don't know.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example, which is really stark and it really struck me at the time. It's this young man who was in his 20s, providing for his family, like young children, and he had horrendous psoriasis all over his body. And he was a delivery driver. So he would have to get out of his van and he'd get sun exposure on his arms and it would make the psoriasis worse, and he would go to A&E. He would go to the hospital emergency department. Now, in the UK, it's free to access. So oftentimes you can't get hold of your family practitioner because there's such queues. So you're better off just going to the emergency department because you'll see somebody there. So he was going to the emergency department as often as once a week because he was in so much pain that he just needed help. And they would say, really sorry, nothing we can do, but here's some topical cream, some topical steroids. Of course, you'll know this, it thins your skin. Topical steroids also mean your skin is more reactive to the sun.
Yeah.
So this was making him worse. Anyway, so I spoke to his wife and she was telling me, and he was in absolute agony. I said, okay, well, what is it that you're eating? Like, have you had your liver checked? Because actually psoriasis is very closely linked to liver function. Are you drinking alcohol? Is there something? And he went, no, I don't have time to eat in the day while I'm working. So I just drink Red Bull.
No.
All day. For the energy.
Yeah, of course. So allergic to things in the Red Bull.
So no, but Red Bull, like a high sugar beverage, and I'm not pointing out Red Bull, it's any
we're just
sugar sweetened beverage, right? Like your liver does not like that. So the risk of having non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, of having fatty liver deposits with that kind of consumption is pretty high. And the liver skin axis is strong, is very powerful. So I said, look, I can't, you're not my patient, but if I can give you one piece of advice is stop drinking those, have coffee and water. And I saw the same lady a year later when I went back. And she was like, thank you so much.
It helped.
It solved
because people don't realize sugar without fiber goes straight to the liver, right?
Yeah, everything goes to the liver, right?
But if you had an orange with at least the fiber, some of it would get knocked out a little bit in your microbiome through digestion, right?
It takes longer to absorb.
But this just kind of hits it. That's why kids get this fatty liver disease.
So, liver disease is one of the fastest growing diseases in the world. And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is now found in children as young as 4.
Come on.
Yeah. So it's but you were talking about type 2 diabetes, and everyone was like, come on, children with type 2 diabetes.
In the 80s,
and now it's like
very common.
And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, it's another metabolic disorder, and it's happening. So, but that's an example of how.
And what country did they come from?
So
do you remember?
I don't remember the exact country.
Because it's even like you think over time, spices and herbs that get consumed in those areas, there's a reason, there's a harmony, the microbiome adjusts accordingly, then they go into this whole different environment. So let's say you have people from other places, misplaced, maybe not a ton of resources. That's one group.
Then the other groups, right? So the men I see invariably heart disease risk. And it's amazing to see how young. So like men in their 30s.
Single, married, is there a difference?
So the single men tend to fare worse.
Yeah.
Truly. That's a good, we know that statistically in marriage, men benefit more than women from being married. So
I know,
no one's surprised.
Been married a long time.
So men, but I have men in my clinic who are in their like mid 30s, early 30s.
And they already have.
It is, stress has a part to play, but it's interesting because they're often like, oh, I don't know why I need to be here. Like I go to the gym, I work out, I look good. Like
I look good.
I look good, and they often have like high power jobs and they're very successful, but they often drink more than they should. Like drinking alcohol is just not good for us, and people often just think, but I only drink like 4 times a week, like maybe 2 or 3 cocktails. I'm like, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, 12 a week, 8 a week.
Quite a lot of drinking.
Kind of adds up.
And they also eat out all the time because they don't like to cook or they don't have time to cook. And the thing is that when you eat out, even if you're eating out at really fancy restaurants, it's not the same as cooking for yourself because restaurants need to make their food taste delicious and they use more different types of fats. Like there's going to be a lot more fat added to that food than if you'd made it at home. I guarantee you. And it's not all going to be extra virgin olive oil, right? So there's the dietary element. There's also like the drinking too much element. There's very high stress. And what I see a lot is high stress jobs, not enough sleep, and then going to like really intense workout classes that add more stress.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't need to batter yourself, by the way. Like so what I find men often don't have is they're not educated to recover, to actually restore themselves.
That's a weakness.
Right. But then I'm like, they come to me often because like, well, my doctor said I need to take statins, but I don't want to take statins. I'm in my 30s. I'm like, yeah, but your doctor's trying to stop you from having a heart attack because all of your cardiovascular risk markers are up. So something's got to change. And so invariably I agree with their cardiologist. I'm like, let me give them 3 months. Let me see if I can turn this around. And okay, fine, you have 3 months.
Yeah, you get to be the good guy.
I get to like try and change it. And you can change it. You can absolutely reverse the risk factors.
Is the alcohol consumption easier to contend with than preparing food for yourself for men?
Depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
So when... it depends on the drinking behavior. So, if it's a problematic
if you're an alcoholic, do you go, hey, you might want to get some help? Are you able to do that?
Yeah. And it's like, and then sometimes it's like, well, they don't even want to go there, or they'll say like, oh yeah, I'll try, and then they don't really try, or they think they try for a day, or it can take a long time.
What if it's a thing where, because obviously alcohol is used in so many different ways, right? Celebratory, take the edge off, or for people, I mean, obviously there's addiction, but a lot of times they're masking.
Yes.
So what if you see them for the 3rd time and you go, oh, this person has an emotional problem.
Yeah.
And they are using alcohol to pacify, which by the way, we all use different things. I could use control, someone else, and exercise. Someone else could use food. Yeah. Someone else could use sex. Yeah. Whatever. It's just a way to, do you have to say, you might want to see somebody and talk to them?
Listen, the reason why I moved into a multidisciplinary team clinic is because the amount of referrals, people come to, in some ways, going to a nutritionist for food is like, okay. And then they come to me and I'm like, I'll definitely help you, but you definitely need to see a therapist.
Yeah.
Like I can help you look at your diet, but all of this stuff, you need help. So I refer to psychotherapists a lot. I refer to specialist clinics. So my husband runs a charity that helps with addiction recovery. And the amount of people we just help with referring through to treatment, so it doesn't always have to be inpatient, but you have to do it. You have to say to them, look, I really think you might benefit from this help. I can only help you to a point. But if you don't tackle this, I'm not going to be able to help you beyond that. And I'm very, it's very important, not just for me, it's very important for healthcare professionals to know when to pass on the baton.
Yeah.
You can't be everything to everyone. So like, I know what my specialty is. I know what I can help you with. I know what I can change. I also know what I definitely cannot.
Yeah.
And that's where referrals are super important. So that's quite common. Like alcoholism isn't common, but a difficult or like a unhealthy relationship with alcohol is quite
for
common.
sure. So if you have a guy who comes, or a girl for that matter, but let's stay in our group right now. If you said, okay, listen, if you could figure out how to make dinner for yourself, this would be a great start.
Yeah.
And so, this is the thing people don't realize. It's not all the changes all at once. No. It's little changes. Would the win be dinner, or the win is?
The win is breakfast and snacks.
Snacks.
Yeah. So I'll tell you why, right?
I don't know what it is about the word snacks.
It's because you're a mom.
I feel like once you're past 16, unless you're doing sports, it's like enough with the snacks.
No, but 85% of adults snack.
I know, but it's just like, I need a snack. It's like, make a meal or don't eat.
Or don't eat. Right. Yeah, so I'm like you. I don't do snacking, but we're in the minority.
I only use snacking when I'm stressed out. And I go, look at me shoving this bar in my mouth right now because I'm stressed.
Because you're stressed.
Yeah. And I know what it is, but it's not habitual.
But the majority of people snack. Like it's the majority.
Yeah,
and
it's everywhere too.
And the thing is, that's true. And the thing is that, so when you look at how people eat, about 20% of calories come from breakfast.
Okay.
And breakfast, it tends to be a meal that you're either having at home or that you're able to prepare before you leave your house. Just because most people leave for the day from the morning.
Yeah.
So there's like a basic principle of control over breakfast. So I always say begin with breakfast. It doesn't matter if your breakfast is at 11 a.m. or 6 a.m. I don't care what time you have it. Try to keep it consistent though. And I do care if you're a man or woman, actually. Premenopausal women, really good idea to have food when you wake up if you don't want to interfere with thyroid and hormone and your estrogen levels. Like, we're very sensitive to prolonged fasting in the morning. So don't do it. You'll know this from Stacey Sims. She's the absolute queen of this science.
Yeah.
So now, but depending on when you wake up, you have your breakfast. Try and have it around the same time every day. Our body loves to know when it's going to eat. Circadian biology means that our cells just like to know what's happening. They can't tell what you're doing. And if you mess it around all the time, it actually impacts your metabolic health. So around the same time. Most people have a bit of control over that, even if it means grab and go and take it with you, right? But I would much rather you had prepared yourself a jar, an old jam jar that you have filled with some yogurt, some frozen berries, and some nuts. You take that with you. It's going to be better than anything you find on the road.
Yeah.
So breakfast is great. Now snacks, about a quarter of our calories come from snacks, 25%.
Come on.
Yeah.
I also read, tell me if this is true, like something like 20% of our calories is something we drink.
So in the US,
right,
20% of calories from sugar come from
drinks.
Sugar sweetened, but you guys sweeten everything. So when I come here,
you're making
not you.
Do you see that?
But when I go to, like,
I'll take the whole US side. Yes,
you, Gabby.
I know.
When I go to a coffee shop, I have to say unsweetened. Otherwise, it'll just be like, what just happened?
Too much. You want 3 pumps in there? It's like 3 pumps of what?
So the other day, I was like, can I get an ice matcha? And then I drank it. And I was like, what is this? And they just squirted a whole thing of honey in it. And I was like, I didn't want it. And they're like, oh, you want unsweetened? I was like, assume yes. Unless, but then, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
So
the US, there is a differentiating between us and over the pond.
Yes.
You guys do that less.
Yes. You guys get a lot of calories from sugar in your drinks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everything is so abundant here. That's the thing. I think everything starts so big and abundant and grand sized and double mega and all that stuff. We started that. We get more. Everything's bigger. We get more for less. Bigger all cars, that. Yeah, everything's big.
Houses, bigger meals.
Yeah.
Well, Marion Nestle famously did the analysis. She's a legend in nutrition science, and she did this analysis that showed that the average US adult has 4,000 calories available to them per day. Whoa. So when the food industry started working in the 40s and 50s to try and create and make sure there was enough food to feed US families. There was an under availability of calories for the projection of the growing population, right? So this whole problem started with trying to solve for something that was going to be problematic, and we just completely overshot the mark. So it's like, okay, now there's too much.
Well, yeah, now they can make a ton of cash on it on both sides, right? They can sell us stuff up front. They can keep, they can medicate us up back, and there's all kinds of fun stuff with that. So let's say...
so those are my men. They're like...
Men, and is it the typical man, let's say till 50, is he eating 1,700 calories a day? Like what is good if he's not a triathlete? Like what is a decent average kind of mark?
So calories is actually not the best way to think about individual food consumption. It's a good way to understand like what's available for the environment. So like food environment. But calories as a tool for individuals is the most imprecise. It's like, it tells you nothing for health, and it tells you nothing for day to day. So like, it also tells you nothing of how you absorb. There's so many issues with it. So as a tool for research and for understanding what's available to the population is quite useful. But let me give you an example of back of pack labeling. Okay, so you have almond flour, 100 grams, and almonds, 100 grams. Back of pack, same calories, same fat, same sugar content, exactly the same food, right? But if you ate almond flour and if you ate whole almonds, you absorb a completely different amount of nutrients from both. And you absorb a different amount to me.
Right.
So having the number on the back, say it's not, but say it's 100 calories, right? From the almond flour, you'll probably absorb, like 86 calories, right? From the whole almonds, you'll maybe absorb 40. Because guess what? Almonds are hard.
Yeah.
You got to chew them. You might not be someone who chews that long. So actually, it stays pretty much whole, and your body can't even extract the carbohydrates because the cell matrix, the food matrix is so strong. You poop it out.
Yeah.
So it just goes straight through you, basically, right? So for me, it's like people that calorie count, first of all, talk about removing the joy of food. Like, who wants to calorie count?
That's very female, though, right? More than male?
Very female.
It's a control thing.
It's a control thing. And it's also diet culture. Like, you feel failing if, like, what are you doing? What are you doing wrong that you can't stay the same size after having 3 kids and going through menopause? Like, how dare you change your jean size?
Yeah, you're not in your high school.
What do you mean?
So wild.
Like, people really do that. So calories for individuals is just very flawed because of the variability in absorption, the variability in availability of calories in food, and also the variability in how many calories I need day to day. Yesterday, I happened to have a very active day where I was like walking up and down LA. Then I decided to do a Barry's class as well, because why not, we're here. And so like compared to the day before where actually I'd been in meetings yesterday, very different needs. So what do I do? Well, if I'm hungry, I eat. Yeah. And if I'm not that hungry, I don't eat as much, right? But I don't count my calories. And calories tell you nothing about food quality. Okay, because classic example of like an avocado, high in calories, has a hell of a lot of other things it brings to the plate. A donut is relatively low in calories compared to an avocado. But you don't need me to tell you that it's not giving you the same nutritional benefits, right?
So you have... I wonder why people can't hear this. I one of my favorite arguments would listen to my husband argue with one of his best friends who passed away years ago. And our friend was from he was much older, and he was like the workout culture from the 80s. A calorie is a calorie.
Yeah.
And Laird's like, so a calorie from kale is the same as calorie from ice cream. And they would go at it because it's like, come on.
Yeah.
So young women, are they starving themselves?
Yes.
What do they got going? And they get the frappuccino caramel thing in the morning, and then starve themselves all day long and have a what at night kind of thing.
It's really sad.
Is it still going on?
Yeah.
It's
really sad. Yeah. So young women, but even up to like 35, I'd say. So it's actually quite a big age bracket. They are scared of food. They're not just that they want to be thin. It's more than that, actually. So my older women, my older patients who are like in their 50s,
like my age,
pure diet culture though, they're like, they're just like, but I can't eat that because it's high in calories, right? Or like, but I'm not going to eat nuts, they're high in fat. So there's still that mentality.
Yeah.
And
then they're scared to eat
that's
healthy
45
fat.
plus, right? That's like, and it's very, very common and very hard to sort of not hard, but it takes a lot of like re-education and just saying like that we need to sort of move past that.
Yeah.
And it always happens because with perimenopause and menopause, your body changes, your metabolism changes, these things start to happen. And so these rigid rules that you've been living with just don't stick anymore.
They don't work.
And so it's a pivot. But the younger women have a very, like, it's a poor relationship with food. So there's a lot of fear around food. I mean, I won't name names, but some of the influencers have created work for me. There are women
you don't have to say who, but what are they saying or doing that's making the work?
There are women who are sort of starving themselves because they believe that it's going to help them achieve some health outcome, which is not relevant to humans. It's relevant to mice.
What does that mean? Like being skinny?
So no. Like, so it's not actually necessarily being skinny, but so there's women, for example, who are of childbearing age, premenopausal, already slim, who will do prolonged fasts in the morning. They'll like fast and they'll do this for months. And they'll think that, they're like, well, I'm trying to balance my hormones with fasting. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that, actually, unfortunately. And by the time they come to me, they're very ill. So
what does that look like?
Well, it looks like
because they're pretty and they're skinny.
Yeah,
and the wheels haven't come off the bus yet, but but they're moving in that direction. So what does it look like on paper?
Their hair's falling out. Their periods are starting to skip. They're very tired. They get sick all the time. They catch all they often have like young kids. So maybe they started doing this postnatal, and they can't keep up with the children. They catch everything the child gets, and they're really starting to suffer. So it's a really worrying, but the problem is it's not just fasting. There's other examples of like women who have cut out entire food groups.
Like what?
They no longer eat gluten, even though they never had issues with gluten before. So there was nothing, it wasn't from them. It wasn't from their experience. It was, they were told to
the media.
Cut out gluten, cut out dairy, cut out entire food groups, but for not listening to the person.
Experience. Yeah.
Right. So it's like if someone comes to me and they go, listen, I feel dreadful every time I eat cheese. I'm like, okay, well, let's not eat cheese. Yeah. But these women are cutting entire food groups out based on something that's not to do with them, cutting out pulses or whole grains for fear of lectins or oxalates in spinach. I mean, it's wild. I can't even tell you all the things because sometimes I go, so where did you hear that? Because they're brand new. I'm like, I haven't heard that one. But what results is have women who come to me and they are reduced down to eating a handful of things because they're so scared of food and they think that these foods are causing them to be ill. And it's the lack of nutrients in food and the stress of trying to eat that way that's making them ill. So that's really common in the younger.
And then my group
population.
is calorie counting.
Yeah.
And over cardiovascular exercising, treadmilling, spinning themselves to death instead of keeping and maintaining or building muscle.
Yeah. And also an obsession with protein. An obsession.
My group has an obsession with protein.
So there's two camps. There's
I'd have to get, by the way,
because
I know it's 1 gram per ideal, right, body weight.
Per kilogram.
Per kilogram of 1 pound of ideal body weight, right? So let's say sitting here, I'm 180 pounds.
Okay.
My ideal weight's probably more like 175. Like if I was going to get more nitpicky, maybe 172 actually. If I was like going to get my psycho side for a second.
I think you look great.
But you know what I mean? Like if I was really going to be like the one that's alone in the mirror by myself.
Right.
The 172.
Okay.
There's no way.
No.
And I lift heavy weight and I try.
You're doing per pound.
Yes.
I'm saying per kilogram.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is way more than what I'm saying, actually.
Yeah. Well, what I have heard is it's 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight.
Yeah.
So this for me, I know I can't do it. So
Yeah.
I say, hey, I get the win in the morning and I try to get a win at night on my protein intake, and I just do the best I can and try not to worry about it. But this obsession, I understand but what I find so curious is they're obsessed with protein consumption, but not with building muscle.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but that's because so this group is really interesting because you have one half is what I like to call my French women.
Yeah.
Because they just want to be skinny. They're like, well, I just want to be the same size that I was when I was like 28.
Yeah.
And I'm 53 now, but that doesn't matter because I'm like, can you keep me skinny? And so I say, okay, we need to change your diet. Your metabolism has changed. Your gut microbiome composition has changed. So what you eat is impacting also, by the way, your gut microbiome impacts your metabolism. So you need to feed it. And they're like, yeah, but don't tell me to eat nuts because they have too much fat. So that's my French women, I call them. There's this sort of coffee and cigarette diet people. And with that, it's a lot about helping them to like actually embrace food and make it something that's joyful again, and helping them to realize that for them to be able to stay strong and actually live independently into older age, they need to let go of the skinny thing because nothing is going to take away your independence like a lack of muscle.
Yeah, being frail.
Yeah. So that's different. But then the other group is the women who are really scared of becoming frail. And what they're seeing online is, especially if you're perimenopausal or menopausal, you have to have loads of protein. And I say, okay, but are you lifting heavy weights? And the thing is, it's like, there's fear around it. It's not like, oh, well, I'm going to try and enjoy. It's like, if you don't get enough protein, you're going to get sarcopenia. Yeah. And if you don't get enough protein, you're going to get fatter. And if you don't get enough protein, your hair will fall out. And so that it's, again, very fear-based. And when you combine the two, if you have a French coffee and cigarette combined with protein fear, then that's where you have the women who are essentially eating no food. They're drinking loads of protein shakes and eating like, I don't know, boiled chicken breasts. And they're really, really suffering with their health for all those reasons together. And it's what I find really sort of sad is to see is the fear associated. So the thing that I find incredibly sort of sad is that so many of these women, by the time and I know I'm the person they come to when they've tried things and it hasn't worked. So I get they're sort of at the end
of the road,
but they are so scared of food. And often actually, especially with the women who come to me who are mothers, the reason they come to me is because they don't want to pass the fear on to their children. They're like, I need to fix this because I don't want my kids to have a bad relationship with food like I have.
How much of it was a comment when they were a teenager? Like, oh, you're, a mother or an aunt said, oh, you're looking a little round. How much was it that, or how much is it just constant bombardment with social media? In my day, it was magazines.
Yeah.
Is it a personal situation mostly, or is it usually the world kind of coming at them and saying, you should look like this, and this is what's pretty. Don't worry about that it's been retouched or it's filtered or whatever it is, and it actually doesn't exist. Don't worry about that. Please compare yourself to that.
I think that there's a bit of both. Actually, the women who I work with and the men who I work with who had difficult childhood experiences, they tend to be the people who are actually overweight or suffering with obesity. Yeah. And that's a different...
That's why I was asking about the...
Yeah, different...
About
it's a different problem.
The traumas and things in using food for, pacification or to hide. Maybe I'll become invisible, someone will leave me alone or not touch me or whatever the things.
So you may have read The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, of course.
So he's the OG in terms of describing this in a clinical setting where a majority percentage of people, and especially women who have clinical obesity, have suffered trauma. Yeah. So it's like, and I think it's important to say that actually, because there's still this stigma of, well, it's just because you're stupid, or
you're lazy,
you don't know. It's
Yeah.
like,
This is deep.
very, very, very often
Yeah.
a deep trauma base to that. Okay, so what does that tell us about how our food environment is? Our food environment coupled with the way we live nowadays is like not a good combination for that.
Yeah.
But for these women who have just a poor relationship with food because they're scared, I have to say, I think social media plays a massive part.
Yeah.
Now, magazines play. Now, if you're like my age group, sort of these 35 to 45, where we had the magazines and the MTV and now the social media, it's like, it's relentless. Like we've grown up with, sometimes I watch back, these clips on Instagram where people pull together things that actually happened on TV back in the 90s where, we'd ask Victoria Beckham to weigh herself after having her children on live TV to see if she'd bounced back. Or where they'd ask like Britney Spears, don't you think you put on weight in a live interview? Like all this stuff was normal. It was just part of TV culture. And we grew up with that as being okay.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely plays a part. But the problem with social media today, and I think it's not just a problem. It's a very well recognized problem in academia. So there was actually a paper that was published today in the BMJ commentary that talks about the fact that as an academic scientific community, we're not doing a good job of fighting against misinformation. So the misinformation, the infodemic, the misinformation epidemic, and there's like entire WHO web pages that are trying to understand how can we help to stop it because there's so much of it. When you go online and the way that the algorithms work, if you're a woman of a certain age looking for a solution to balance my hormones, to feel less tired, to postpartum hair loss solutions, whatever it is that your thing is, it'll just keep feeding you the same content you interact with. So then there is so much content available that is fear-mongering on food. I mean, I came across one the other day. I'd never seen this person before. And she was talking about peanut butter being toxic. And it was one of like suggested on my thing. And I was like, who is this? And what is she talking about? And it went viral. This thing went viral, and the amount of people that sent it to me, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Like, oh my God, my kids eat peanut butter. I'm like, no, it's not true. Yeah. And it's a tidal wave of continuous misinformation. And so then you get to a point where I think that's why we have these women, it's mostly women that have this fear of like, I don't know what to eat anymore. Can you help me?
But they also do it to each other in this way. And I think this has been forever in time. Yeah. It's like, we are tough on each other and we create these things, these sort of models of like, well, you're supposed to be perfect, have a perfect dinner, perfect family, perfect house, get it together, and, they're crying themselves to sleep. Or quote, my favorite is I drink my calories. That's my favorite, the booze, drink my calories kind of thing. So what is it that you can say? Maybe give me a story of somebody who saw the light and why, and what was the impact? Was it, oh my God, I woke up and I had energy and I felt rested. Yeah. Is that enough sometimes in the beginning to get people to keep going in the right direction?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So yeah, I'll answer that in two parts. So that one of my favorite patients, she came to me, she had battled with diets all her life. Never could get to the weight she wanted to get. Beautiful, obviously, beautiful woman, extremely successful, hilarious. But she was obsessed with getting to a number on a scale. That's all she wanted to do. And the reason she came to me was because she had decided to go through fertility treatment, and her doctors had recommended that she get to whatever weight she wanted to get to before they started. Because when you go through fertility treatment, it always impacts your weight. The cycles of hormones tend to mean that you put on quite a lot of weight. So the recommendation is get as fit as you want to feel.
And then what's the treatment that she was going to go
like
through?
Freezing. Yeah. So like you have to harvest, and it's quite intense, right? So it's like get fit because your body's going to go through some stuff.
Yeah.
And she came to me, she was like, I just want to get to this weight. And I was like, well, okay, it's not really so much about the weight. Like, let's talk about, she was very active. trained, very, very sporty, very, trained very well, was very consistent with her training. But she just had fallen out of love with food. She was like, food's my enemy. Like anything I eat, I don't lose weight. And so she just ate the same thing, hated it. So I said, look, I want you to just not weigh yourself for like a month. And she was like, what? But just don't weigh yourself for a month. I want you to like make these changes to your diet. Let's do it a step at a time. Don't rush it. Just get one thing right and then move on to the next. So like get your breakfast. Then we'll look at the snacks. Then and she was like she was quite sort of, it's not going to work. She was like, okay, but I'll give it a go kind of thing. And the first follow-up call I had with her, she was like, I haven't really lost that much weight. I've done everything you've asked me to do. And I just, I lost a little bit, but I thought it'd be more by now. I was like, okay, that's fair. But how do you feel sort of, do you feel like you're less tired in the afternoons? She was like, yeah, actually, I guess so. So that exercise class you like to do in the afternoons after work, like, have you found that that's been better? Actually, yeah, I have enjoyed it more. Okay. And how do you feel like, how are your clothes fitting you? How is your body? How does it feel? She was like, actually, now you mention it, I do. But I had to ask her to reflect because the number wasn't what she wanted.
Yeah, we get so granular on.
And then she was like, and actually, like my skin's been really great. And actually, like my bloating's gone down. And so she was hilarious because after all, she was like, yeah, I don't need to see you anymore. Like, I love my food. She was enjoying her food. She loved what she ate. She went through the treatment. It was successful. It was great. But she was like, she just actually embraced food as joyous.
Yeah.
The fact that her body was super fit and like she exercised beautifully. And she was like, do you know what? I'm never going to be that weight. But this is my body and I'm now feeding. So she's like, now what I saw with her and like other women I worked with in similar settings, my mum's actually one of my favorite patients because she's just completely transformed her life in her 60s. She's now in her 70s and loves food. She has enormous breakfasts with like mushrooms and lentils and things. And she's honestly, she's so much better. She doesn't get sick. She's stopped medication that she was taking for like, heart disease. She's really transformed her health. She's another great example. And it took me so long with her to be like, Mommy, thin is not a good plan. Being thin in your 70s is not a good plan. She she has a trainer, she lifts heavy weights. She's really, so it happens. Now what we see, like what's really interesting is, okay, this is individual people, but what's amazing about Zoe is that we have, the data from our members. What do we hear from them and what do we see in our trials? So when Professor Sarah Berry set up the trials, it's like the usual markers, right? It's like, LDL, HDL, triglycerides, like all these things. And then we're like, maybe we should ask people how they feel, actually.
Amazing. Imagine that.
So we're one of the few people that have randomized controlled trials that report on cardiometabolic markers, the standard stuff, and how people feel. And in our trials, the thing that's always the best thing is better sleep, better energy, better mood. Like I feel great. And that is the strongest motivator. Because if you want someone to change their diet for good, because listen, if you come and see me one-on-one, I don't want to see you more than 4 times because then I'm not doing my job.
Yeah.
The only exceptions are fertility treatment or if there's like a specific outcome that can take time. But most of my patients, I literally see them 3-4 times. And I'm like, come check in with me if you want. There's one of my patients, I love her. I'm like, you don't need to see me. She's like, no, I just like it. Yeah. I'm like, okay, but you know what you're doing. So we're just having a chat.
Right.
But it's once people are motivated when they can feel a difference. And then once they know what they're doing and they get the hang of listening to their bodies, eating in a way that fuels them, understanding and also there is a level to like understanding how your body works. So understanding why chrononutrition is important, like why you will feel pretty rubbish if you eat really late at night. Or once you get those in place, then people have the agency to do it themselves. And then of course, like life events happen. So fertility, pregnancy, there are times in life when there are some major changes that we need to like address. Menopause is the other big one. Then, or if there's a disease, like the thing with prevention is that primary prevention is where we all want to work, right? Primary prevention is like the best because it's like before anything happens and it's great. But if you're somebody who already has high blood pressure or already has like really high blood cholesterol, that's still prevention is just secondary prevention. Okay, you have high blood pressure, you may need to take medication, but we're trying to avoid you having a heart attack or a stroke, right? And then there's people who listen, they've had their stroke. But listen, there's primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. It's never too late to work on preventing the next thing that we want to avoid.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's important because people will accept not feeling good as part of just, that's how life is. I always feel tired. I always feel gassy and bloated. I'm a person who's had this issue, instead of I can get healthier, I can get stronger, even if I'm aging, because that means you're alive.
Yes.
I think it's such an important tool. And, I find it fascinating that you're seeing patients. You've written books. You have a science and nutrition podcast, and you work at Zoe, which I really appreciate, this kind of combining, because a lot of times there will be good information out there, but if it doesn't come from, real doctors, oftentimes the general population they're not going to be able to touch it. They just, in their brains, they don't know how to decipher what's good information, what's not. Yeah. And so I think that what you guys are doing is so important. And a lot of your work, I just need to ask one quick question. How do you get guys to cook for themselves?
Guys?
Yeah.
So, well, some of them won't.
What about those food delivery things? Do you have those in the UK? Is that's a better solution? Because at least you know kind of maybe what oil you're preparing it. And like you said, even the fact of you handling your own food just a little.
Yeah. Makes a difference to how your body prepares to then eat it.
Yes.
And the sensory experience is completely different. Yeah. So there are food delivery. Some of them are better than others. The ones that use higher quality ingredients and are like designed by dietitians or nutritionists tend to be better. But a lot of them are just like my fitness, like protein again. So there are better. There's a variety of them. Now most of there's one of my patients who literally will not boil an egg, but some of them will actually then. So this is how I explain it to a lot of them. I say, okay, you pay me, you pay your personal trainer, you pay your music teacher that is teaching you to play piano to keep your brain really active and prevent dementia, which is a true thing, right? We know that learning an instrument is really good for brain health. You pay for your tennis instructor.
Slugging down a bunch of booze.
And then, I'm like, what about paying to learn how to cook? Because guess what? It's a life skill that is going to help you live better and longer. Why are we so reluctant to pay to learn? So like nowadays we don't, and like in certain communities we don't watch our grandmas and our mums in the kitchen and like absorb that knowledge, right? So, okay, we have to fix that. So in the same way that we don't hunter and gather and move all day, every day, we have to make time and go. We need rent a granny. We need to learn how to cook. Yeah. And it might be going and hanging out with like elders in your community.
Yeah.
But actually here in the US, one of the estimates is now that we're in the 4th generation of non-cookers. So like it might be hard to find the granny.
Yeah, once they glorified TV dinners.
Yes.
That was like that was a thing. You were sort of fancy.
You were fancy if you didn't have to cook.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like, ooh, so interesting.
So now we have to undo that a bit.
Yeah.
And so I say like, go to and learn how to cook. So one of my patients.
And if they're single, you never know. They could meet other people.
Might meet your
and
dream
I think
partner.
if it is true, it'd be something you could do with a friend and be like, hey, we're going to chip in on this together. We're going to get somebody and help or take a class or figure that out.
There's amazing classes. Sure. And there's you can even go as far as going online and doing it off YouTube, right? There's so much content out there on how to cook. So I think I would encourage people to see this as a life skill worth investing in, because it's really going to pay off for you.
Yeah.
So you might as well. And then listen, delivery systems are good in some ways, but there's also so many there's so many meals you can prepare with no cooking, where you just combine foods together. So whether that is like your yogurt, frozen berries, nuts and seeds, or whether that is like buying some beans, you can get parboiled spelt. You can get parboiled whole grains that you microwave for a minute that have no additives. Just put those with the beans, grab a handful of spinach and put it in there. Like you can build meals without having to chop anything if you really have to. But it's worth investing in actually getting to know how to do it, because it's only going to help you in the long term. So it's for me, it's like a really obvious way of showing love for yourself and showing up for yourself. And especially if you have a family, like it's a life skill you can be passing on.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think that I always joke, now that my youngest is a senior, I told her, the cooking and cleaning might be stopping soon because they all know or don't know how to do it by now. And,
Yeah. You better learn quick.
I'm tired.
I'm done. I've given my bits.
So for your focus, you talk a lot about something that everybody talks about, that it's complicated, but yet simple. And that is the importance and power of a healthy microbiome.
Yeah.
And I know people have heard this ad nauseum, but it's worth visiting. So based on all your studies and then, your work of writing books and the, hundreds of conversations you've had around this space.
Yeah.
Why did you decide, okay, I'm going to spend a little more time and pay attention to the microbiome?
It's a great question. The reason why is because, so when you look at diet's impact on health, you're like, this is really cool. So I went into nutrition in the end after my master's and my PhD because it was obvious to me that nutrition was having this monumental impact on health and that it was something we could change. It's quite hard to change your socioeconomic status. It's quite hard to change who your parents are. It's quite hard to change the pollution you're exposed to in the city you live in. Yeah. Well, these are all things that also impact, right? So for me, it's like, okay, this is a thing that we can give people power over themselves. This is really cool. Let's do it. So when I started looking at the science, and I was trying to understand, like, but why does a Mediterranean diet have this impact? And old school nutrition science was like, well, it's the vitamin E and vitamin C, and it's like the individual micronutrients are having this effect. Doesn't explain it, because then when you look at the trials for micronutrient supplementation, like if it's the micronutrients in the diet that's doing it, then supplementing with micronutrients will do the thing. Doesn't do the thing, like at all, right? It's actually, it's quite sad when you look at vitamin and supplement research, because at best it has a fractional impact compared to diet. Like even with our own science, the impact that we have when people adopt a Zoe way of eating, so they change their diet, is a big impact. When they buy the supplement that we create to help you increase your fiber, it's an impact, but it's fractional compared to changing your diet. So what is it? Why? It's not the micronutrients. It's not the macronutrients. It's not the flavor combinations. I mean, there's some fascinating science specifically on soffritto base. So the onions, carrots, celery, extra virgin olive oil.
The base of every soup in the planet.
In the Mediterranean diet. Like there's science on that and what happens when you lightly fry it in extra virgin olive oil. It creates new compounds that have a health effect. But then the aha moment is the microbiome is the mediator for the health effects. It's not the micronutrients by themselves. It's the impact of that combination of foods, the hundreds of chemicals that are in there. Because also, let's not forget, there's macros, there's micros, and there's a whole other bigger class of bioactive compounds that don't fit into either, right? Now, those hundreds of chemicals, how they interact with the millions of microbes in your gut, that's where the magic happens. Then those microbes break down those thousands of chemicals and fibers and create other thousands of chemicals themselves as byproducts of the breakdown that then themselves have an impact on our health. So the reason why gut microbiome science is so exciting is because it's actually helping us to explain what the mediating factors are for the health impacts we're seeing. Not only for diet, by the way. So diet is the first frontier where we're like, huzzah, finally we understand why eating plants is so good for us and why drinking juice isn't.
Yeah.
Look at this, like we're understanding. Great. And why complex why variety of food? So why having a complex composition of hundreds of chemicals is better than having a diet that is restricted in the amount of foods. Like the same micro and macros, but very different food sources, very different health effects. So a varied diet is much better for you than a restricted diet. Now we're seeing that the gut microbiome, but this which makes sense when you say it out loud, also interacts with medications, with pollutants, with microplastics we're ingesting. Like all these things, you have to remember that our gut is actually an external tube in contact with our external environment. So it's like our skin is in constant contact with the outside world. Your entire GI tract is in constant contact with things from the outside, be it air that you swallow, be it the food that you eat, the things that you drink, right? And the drugs that you take. So now we're starting to see like, okay, this is the intermediary. This is the thing that's changing the composition of what's happening. And the population of microbes that live in your gut directly respond to what they're exposed to. So like any ecosystem, if you change a factor in an ecosystem, if you remove one animal, or if you increase the temperature, or if you create a drought, it changes the entire ecosystem. Same thing with your gut. So it's a living organism that's constantly evolving and changing depending on external influence. So I'll give you an example for myself. I very, very proud that I don't normally get sick. I got a viral infection this winter, which absolutely knocked me sideways. I was in bed for 3 days, unheard of for me. I was like, what is happening? And actually then had to travel and ended up getting a chest infection. That's never happened to me. I've never had like the bacterial chest infection post-virally. So I had to take antibiotics. Last time I took antibiotics was when I had a cesarean section for my second child. Like, don't take them. I was like, wow, like that is all, will have all had an impact on my gut microbiome. And like with that knowledge comes with, okay, right, I need to help this thing rebuild. What other things? Now, what's really nice about gut microbiome science, it's a relatively new field, but it's not that new. It's been going for like 20 years, right? So we know what makes a good, healthy gut microbiome. Our gut microbiome needs fiber. There is no question. It needs a high fiber diet. It loves fiber. It loves bioactive compounds from plants, sometimes called polyphenols, right? The colorful things from berries. Loves that. It also loves it when you move, by the way, because apart from the fact that exercise actually modulates gut microbiome composition, our GI tract is designed to move things along when you're standing up. Very hard when you bend your pelvis for that to keep things moving. Going to the loo regularly is critical for a healthy gut microbiome. Like, your gut doesn't want stuff to hang around in there. So there's all these things that we know. And when the ecosystem is disrupted or when it's not being supported, then not only does it impact how you feel for things like bloating or, constipation, it also actually impacts how you absorb and utilize the food that you're eating and how your body is going to interact with drugs that you take. So there's now a really good body of evidence to suggest that some people are non-responders to paracetamol because of their gut microbiome composition. Or that the efficacy of SSRIs in depression treatment is in part impacted by your gut microbiome composition. So it's really important. It's really cool.
And I always find it interesting that a lot of medications are very tough on your microbiome. So it's this whole kind of back and forth, how much juice for the squeeze sort of on some of the
PPIs is my favorite example of that.
Yeah. It's sort of, so if you took antibiotics, what were some of the things you were right away like, okay, I'm going to be diligent and just support? Because I think it's really confusing for people, the healthy, supporting the healthy, bacteria versus the unhealthy. I think all of that. So, I mean, there's fermented foods and there's certain things. Were there things that you thought, okay, this I'm just going to kind of double up on and see if I can boost my gut? Because we do get gassed by antibiotics.
Yeah. I mean, so straight away, I over-indexed. I was like, right, natural yogurt, a shit ton of different seeds, like all the seeds, all the nuts, fruit whole fruit several times a day. Just like, and as many vegetables, as many plants, lentils, chickpeas, just ate a very high fiber diet. I have a high fiber diet anyway, but I like ramped it up. I was like, more fiber, as many things as I can get a hold of. I also I got a probiotic as well. So there are probiotics that are designed to be taken with antibiotics. It helps to reduce the gastric side effects of antibiotics, and also just helps to throw a few good guys in there whilst everyone's getting wiped out. So did that. But plenty of water, mostly because actually also antibiotics are quite hardcore on your liver. You just need to help your body when you can. And obviously no alcohol, not only because it interacts with the antibiotics, but it's a pro-inflammatory for your gut as well. So none of that. And I just really also knowing, like, I think some people get really upset. Like, I had to take antibiotics and now my gut, and I'm like, yeah, but you had to take the and it
starts to rejuvenate. People don't realize how quickly. I mean, within 24 hours, you can start to make improvements.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's interesting. As I've gotten older, one thing is, like, I have issues sometimes with my knee. Not sometimes. I've had issues with my knees for over 25 years. Is sometimes when I'm thinking about an area of my body, I just send it love. And I know it, I mean, you wouldn't, I mean, seeing me here, I don't seem so,
hippy dippy.
Yeah. But I do, even when I'm training, and I know the areas that I'm vulnerable. So if somebody's going through something and, like, you go, I'm taking the antibiotics because I had this incision and it's a good idea. I think when we think about those areas and we send it love, even if it's put your hands over it and send it love, we don't give that enough credit.
Oh my God, Gabby, it's so funny because my dad used to do this. And
must have drove your mother nuts.
No, it didn't actually, because it worked. So he had these, like, one of the things I missed the most about him were his hands. He was a big man, big hands, big, like, meaty hands. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Doing hands.
Like, and if I had a stomach ache or like anything, he would rub his hands together and he would just hold them, and it made it better.
Yeah.
And my mom, credit to her, she is an evidence-based lady. She was like, if it's working, it's working. Let's go. Now, funnily enough, he said, I have that. So if he used to get like a neck ache, or he would like, can you just put your hands? And I would do it for him. Yeah. And listen, I'm hardcore science background through and through, but there are certain things. There are things that make sense, because at the end of the day, like, we don't understand everything, right? And there's plenty of science on energy, and there's plenty of science on the power that has and the power of thought. So I really believe that. So for me, like, people are like, oh, I'm so sorry you had to take antibiotics. I was like, are you joking? I'm so glad they gave them to me. I couldn't breathe.
Yeah, it's lucky, right? Yeah.
And part of the process is to be like, I'm so grateful that I'm better. And I'm going to give myself the time to heal back. Yeah. And I'm going to do everything I can from like the science side that I know will help. But I'm also just going to be really kind to myself, because actually that was really hard. That was tough. That was a bit of a beating, actually. And if we take a beating for an external factor and then we beat ourselves up as well, that's not going to help us get better. No. And so it's funny, I think women were very guilty of this. It's like, oh, I don't feel well, but I'm just going to keep going. I'm just, I'll rest at the weekend. I'm like, no. Yeah. We have to also know when it's time to stop. And give ourselves the space to heal. Yeah. Because a lot of it does come from us, from what we can do for ourselves. So I'm all for that, like sending love to the right.
I think so. I think it's something that it's just a small practice. Do you have a test, like if somebody goes, I would like to get my gut checked.
Yeah.
Is there a name of a test that you like for people if they say, hey, I'm feeling pretty good, but I'd like to check it out?
Yeah. So the reason we have a gut microbiome test in the Zoe kit, and the reason why I recommend that one is because we use something called full shotgun metagenomic sequencing, which is a bit of a mouthful. And it basically means that we don't just map one gene. A lot of commercial gut microbiome testing is based on one gene mapping. So they look at a single gene and they sort of try to figure out what's going on. And the analogy that I love for this is, it's like going to a zoo and trying to figure out what animals are in it. And someone says to you, there are mammals here. And you go, that's cool, but is it a monkey or is it an elephant?
Yeah.
Right, 16S doesn't let you distinguish. The technique we use tells you exactly. It is a monkey with a brown tail and a white body. Like, it's very precise. Now, other companies offer this sequencing technique now. It's starting to be more common. But what we still have, which is unique, is we've actually mapped over 250,000 people's gut microbiome composition with actual health outcomes.
Oh.
So the next step is like diversity. Again, going back to the ecosystem. Okay, there's lots of plants here, but are they good for me? Or is it like, the diversity by itself doesn't tell you whether an ecosystem is thriving and happy. Now, we know this because when you look at people who have a vegan diet, they have lower diversity than someone who has an omnivorous diet. Because guess what? If you don't eat cheese and if you don't eat meat, there's no microbes that break those foods down. But when you look at like a vegan health outcome, not all vegans are not omnivores, or it's not for everyone, but like a lot of vegans are extremely healthy. So just diversity doesn't tell you enough when you look at other health markers, right? What we have done is mapped the composition and the different types of microbes to actual health outcomes, like visceral fat. So how much fat is around your organs, like your cardiometabolic health markers of triglycerides, of glucose, blood glucose levels. So that's where you actually then get to see, is your gut microbiome supporting positive health outcomes, or is it actually increasing risk? So I love our testing. There's other tests out there, and some of them, as I said, are starting to do the more advanced sequencing, but it's the mapping of the results, which is still like, I need to be able to map what this means to actual health outcomes. But there is a free thing you can do. So if you don't want to pay for a gut health test, or it's not accessible to you, we actually published a paper which showed that transit time from fork to loo is an extremely good predictor of gut microbiome health. So how do you do that, right? Well, we did this by getting people, this is to bake blue muffins. Using either food dye or by putting a lot of beetroot, because beetroot is very powerful in staining.
Yeah, you think you're dying.
Yes. That one.
Yeah.
So you time when you've eaten it, and you see how long it takes until you see it in the loo. And that gives you a very good indication of how healthy your gut microbiome is. So you can, the other one is like eat a whole load of sweet corn, right?
But corn's the most modified GMO food out there.
Well, so like,
and I love popcorn, but
popcorn's lovely. But sweet corn. But yeah, so eating beetroot, I think, is the most powerful. But just don't have a heart attack.
Yeah. So is there sort of like, hey, good job, 12 hours?
Yeah. So the sort of anything 12, 14, up to 19 is like,
oh, even 19?
Yeah. Oh. Well, it goes right up to, so like the upper end is 36.
Oh, 36.
Not unusual. So if you're sitting within the, say, like 14 to like 26, you're doing really well. Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm 12, right on the nose.
Well, people think that, but it's likely to be yesterday's. So,
because I've checked with the beets.
You've done with the beets? Okay, yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's like the night before, and then you get in the morning and you forgot that you had the beets last night, and then you go, oh my gosh, and then you go, oh, that's right, and then
yeah, so that's great. So actually, transit time is a free transit time.
Okay,
an easy way to know where you're sitting in terms of health, like just a general picture.
Okay, I love that.
And so I recommend people just give that a go.
You were talking earlier about how where this became something really interesting to someone you work with when it came to twins.
Yes.
I thought this was fascinating.
Yeah. So Professor Tim Spector, he founded the Twins UK Registry, which is the Department of Twin Research. It's like the biggest. I don't know how many thousands of twins they have. And he was a geneticist, so he was looking at what can we know from genes and what can we not know from genes. He did all sorts of science around religion and sense of humor and sexuality and is the orgasm genetic? All these amazing pieces of work. But
he must be fun to be married to.
Yeah, and his wife is an absolute legend.
Because you have to like analyze. He'd be like, wait a second. And you're just like, oh, geez, here we go again.
Like just brilliant dinner party guests. So as he was doing this research, he was like that he couldn't explain why certain identical twins, which are genetic clones, had such different health outcomes, specifically around metabolic health. They were like, he was like, how is this happening? And so there's specific twin pairs, concordant twin pairs, which, you know, these are twins that have grown up together and still in adulthood either live together or live very close to each other with very similar lifestyles. So like very, very similar. Because a lot of discordant twin pairs is like, oh, one smokes and one doesn't. Okay. But it's like, these guys still, why are they so different? And he was looking at postprandial postprandial changes. So it's what happens when you eat a meal? How does your blood glucose change? How do your blood fats change? And there were these like tenfold differences in identical twins. He was like, what on earth? And then he looked at their gut microbiome composition. And he was like, hang on a minute. They're really different. So there's Hugo and Ross, who now have like an Instagram account. They're one of the famous twin pairs. They were young, in their 20s at the time, lived together, same BMI, same everything. Very different responses for blood glucose and blood fat. Gut microbiome composition was different. And so then Tim was like, had this moment of like, this is something, this is the thing. So he pivoted the research and started doing some really interesting studies, not only on how variable are these postprandial responses, because going back to like how we, you know, traditional nutrition science is like, you eat the calorie, the thing happens, we're all the same. Well, this research, which is called Predict One, blew that out of the water. It's like, no, because when you take over 1,000 adults who are all healthy, by the way, none of them have any metabolic health issues, there's tenfold differences in response. So you can't give everyone the same advice on what to eat because they're going to respond to it really differently. And so, yeah, that's like the kind of origin story of how Zoe, as a personalized nutrition solution, happened.
I tend to feel that if we sort of have a chance to be a little bit at some kind of homeostasis, like we feel pretty good. Let's say we don't have something chronic happening. I feel like our intuition, if we can really pay attention, is always guiding us.
Yes.
Like you'll see food one day and like you really want this one thing, and then the next day doesn't really interest you, something else interests you. I don't think we give that enough credit.
Agree.
Because of this difference, right? Like not only what I need versus what you need, but also day to day and all these things. And so I always want to encourage people. And listen, I can look at a Dorito and Monday through Sunday and probably would always like it, or a piece of chocolate. Like we get it, but it's like putting that food, even when you go to the market, it's like letting your eyes look at everything. And I feel like it tells you, I think I need this today.
Yeah.
And with your herbs and spices and things like that.
The smells. You're like, this smells good. But I love that. But you know what it is? Going back to the fear and going back to, it's helping people to get back to that.
Trusting themselves.
So much of the work that I certainly do one-on-one is just getting back to that. Because then when you're there and you're like, today I feel like this, my body's telling me I need this, you're good, you're done. You've got it, because you're back in touch with your body and you're listening to the signals. We know that our gut microbiome sends signals to encourage specific eating behaviors. It's a thing.
Good and bad, by the way.
Good and bad.
Yeah, so you got to watch out for those little naughty ones in there.
That's why you need to get a good ecosystem going. But it's getting back to that. We have to first remove the fear, the noise, but I was told I can't do this. I was told I can't eat this. I was told that these are poisonous. When you strip that back and you allow people to listen to their body, so people say to me, oh, but what do you eat? And I'm like, well, but what I eat is for me. So I was actually speaking to a lady this morning. She was like, but do you eat meat? I was like, listen, I don't eat meat because my father passed away from colorectal cancer. And because years ago, like over a decade ago, I realized that actually I don't feel good when I eat red meat.
Yeah.
And so I stopped, but it doesn't mean you need to stop, actually. Like it depends. So when you help people to get back to that and you help them to trust themselves again, that's the job. That's the actual job.
Yeah, that is.
And I think sometimes it just needs that opportunity to reflect and giving people the power to say, okay, listen, one of the key messages here is like nutrition science is not a mystery. Everyone likes to be like, oh, but it's just, we're not sure. It's like, no, we are. The evidence base is super solid. Like the evidence base on what constitutes a healthy diet for most people has been the same, and it keeps being the new studies all point to the same. So there's no debate, just like, oh, we're not really sure whether eating whole grains is good for you or not. No, we know it's really good for your health. It's actually, a diet low in whole grains is the leading dietary risk factor in the world for death and disease. Like, it's strong evidence, right? We can argue or we can like debate about how much protein someone might need if they've just recovered from like chemotherapy compared to someone who is sedentary. Yeah, those are like the fringe things. But the basics, the fundamentals are very, very strong evidence that is highly, extremely unlikely to change. So that's the first thing, removing that fear. Like, it's not a mystery. It's not confusing. People who understand the science all agree. Mm-hmm. If you speak to any nutrition scientist who actually has an expertise in that field, we all agree about the big stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People who don't agree with the big stuff, they're not nutrition scientists. Right. They haven't done the thing. They haven't done the training.
Yeah.
So in the same way that if you spoke to cardiologists agree on what the fundamentals to maintain heart health are.
Yeah. So
we have the same in nutrition. So once we move away from that, and it's like not this mystery, and it's not this like people are not trying to lie to you. It's not. There's not like someone said that I'm part of the plant-based conspiracy. I'm like, what is that? Is there a plant-based conspiracy? I'm not even plant-based.
Well, and you're not saying to other people, hey, don't eat meat.
No.
If you eat meat, I'm sure you're directing them to the highest quality that they can.
Yes, and to making sure that they still have variety.
And getting fiber and getting color in their diet and all those things. So, in rounding out some of this conversation, I would like to, I really would be remiss to not sort of add into the conversation. Mm-hmm. You talk a lot about even in pregnancy, you can support your baby's microbiome in utero. Mm-hmm. So moms that are pregnant can really even start there. And that's not to add one more thing on the list and make people paranoid, but it's to empower them. And hey, there's things you can do. Now, the question might be, maybe you don't feel like eating some of that, especially in the first trimester, if they're feeling wonky. Mm-hmm. But is it just making sure they're eating, real whole foods, or are there extra little things they can do that
Gabby,
boost?
The first 1,000 days is my favorite topic.
I know. Well, that's why I didn't want to let that go.
So pregnancy nutrition, so the first 1,000 days is from conception to second birthday, and pregnancy nutrition is the reason why people like me love it is because as a time to intervene, you can have maximum impact for more than one person, because you can improve maternal health and child health in one go, which is great. But there's some really important things with pregnancy nutrition and the first 1,000 days. First of all, what you ate just before conception is actually the nutrition that supports the first trimester for most women, because you tend to feel sick. You're not able to eat in the same way for most women. So it's actually the preconception diet that has quite a big impact. Why do we recommend that women of childbearing age take folic acid supplementation, even if they're not necessarily planning to get pregnant? Because it's preconception is what goes into the eggs, like what creates the yolk sac for the first trimester. So that's important to remember, but more than half of pregnancies aren't planned. So no. So
I know. Tell me.
We know that.
Yeah.
So it's actually not about saying do this when you plan to have a baby. It's actually, if you're of childbearing age and you're having unprotected sex, just think about this, because it's probably good. It could happen.
Add it.
So like just in the back of your mind, make sure you're nourishing yourself just in case you get pregnant.
Yeah.
So now in terms of like the baby's growth in utero, like even before that, creating a placenta, we create a whole new organ in our bodies to support a whole creation of a being. It's amazing. Like, if you're not in love with the female body, study pregnancy and then you will be. Yeah. It's miraculous. It's absolutely amazing. And then what we eat during pregnancy directly contributes to how the baby is being built. Now, the amazing thing about pregnancy is that the body will take from you if you don't eat enough. And so it will literally reduce your muscle mass and take from your bones to create the baby, right? We don't want that. So eating enough, eating good quality food is really important. Now, in pregnancy, often what I see is two things. Either women over-index on supplementation, and actually supplementing in pregnancy is very delicate. We have to be very careful with I'll give you an example. Protein supplementation in pregnancy can actually lead to intrauterine growth restriction. So it can reduce the growth of the baby. So it's not safe to do. Folic acid is well recognized, vitamin D as a good idea, but otherwise try and get what you can from food, because our metabolism changes to support pregnancy. So we become more insulin resistant, which helps to maintain more blood glucose circulating so that the baby can grow with it. There's loads of changes to the way we actually absorb and utilize and move nutrients, which needs to be thought about before you start chucking things down. So whole foods is the best way to go. Now, babies in utero are in the amniotic sac, so they don't actually have a gut microbiome until they're born. So how are women supporting baby's gut microbiome? Well, our vaginal microbiome completely changes in composition. So vaginal microbiome normally is not very diverse. But that's when it's happy, not diverse.
Yeah.
Lactobacilli mostly, doesn't like intruders, generally just likes to keep it as undiverse as possible. Third trimester comes and gut microbial species start translocating to the vaginal microbiome to create a blueprint of the gut microbiome for the baby to basically inhale on the way out.
Yeah, just get slammed by the...
But it's
amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So the way that the birth canal is structured and the way that babies are supposed to be born is such that as they come out, they essentially swallow what will become the first version of the gut microbiome for the baby. So then this is why we see a big difference between the gut microbiome composition of babies born by cesarean section and born through vaginal delivery. Now, I've had one of each, so I'm not here to shame people. A lot of women opt for cesarean birth now, but it is something to think about because it is vaginal delivery creates a more protective gut microbiome composition for the infant. So babies who are born by vaginal delivery, and by the way, vaginal swabbing doesn't do the same thing. So people have tried that and it does something, but it's not the same. They are more protected against gastrointestinal infections. They have a lower risk of things like asthma and atopic allergies. So it does make a difference. But good news is...
Can you make it up in nursing maybe?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Breastfeeding.
Yes, Doc.
Is magical for babies. When I say it's magical, I mean that it blows my mind.
Why does this frustrate so many people? Why does this become contentious when, for me, it seems like one of the most natural
it is truly
things that we can do? And listen, if someone goes, hey, I couldn't make milk or the baby wouldn't, it is what it is. We do the best we can. But I never understand why people get hysterical about this.
I think there's a few things. First of all, so I had a terrible time nursing my first child. I thought I was going to die.
So you had a vaginal birth, but then couldn't nurse as easily.
Child.
And then the second one, you had to have a C-section, but nursing was good?
Yes, because nursing with the second tends to be easier because your boobs know what they're doing.
Oh.
But, it's just... Now, I think there's a lot of things to unpack. Let's look at the countries with the highest rate of breastfeeding.
Africa?
Yes. Kenya, Ghana, right?
Yeah, and they don't get as much cancer either.
Yeah, because it does reduce risk of cancer for breast cancer.
They go longer and they start earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, those cultures are raised on breastfeeding is everywhere. Your auntie's breastfeeding, your sister's breastfeeding, your grandma's teaching everyone's it's doing it. It's normal. Completely normal.
Everyone's doing it.
Everyone's at it. Right? Now, so these populations, it's interesting because we intervene with public health and we have public health interventions to help support breastfeeding in these countries because it's so much safer for the baby when you don't have access to clean water and sterilizers. For baby formula in low-income countries kills babies because they're made up in conditions that is not hygienic, and so these babies actually die more. So it's really big public health intervention is increase breastfeeding. It protects the babies. And it's been really effective. Now, we haven't had any of this kind of intervention for our populations. And now the UK has the lowest breastfeeding rate in the world.
Really?
In the world.
Is it a social thing? Is it like, I can't be tied down, I don't want my breast to get ruined?
Yes.
It's
a combination of things.
Formula's just as good, and like
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of like fed is best. You know, that there's
fed really, is best. Why? So they sleep through the night?
Instead of breast is best, fed is best. There's so many layers. Like, first of all, the amount of money spent by the formula industry to promote formula feeding as the best, right? Then there's the fact that we don't support women. But by the way, like, breastfeeding is a full-time job. It takes, especially when they're newborns, 8 hours a day you'll be breastfeeding.
Yeah, you're breastfeeding. I used to say you're the human pacifier. Let's go.
Let's go. Breastfeeding education is non-existent. Breastfeeding support is non-existent. Now that we don't have our aunties and grandmas to be like, no, this is how you do it. How are women supposed to learn?
Yeah.
How do they actually, we don't
feel
have
encouraged.
Support.
Especially when you feel tired and all these things, you need that encouragement of like, hey, you got this. And it's important if you can do it.
And it's hard work, but if you can do it, great. Now, here's another thing to think about though.
Okay.
Brazil. Okay. Good breastfeeding rates and big public health. Like, they have a big public health culture. They were like, do you know what, actually, for babies who can't be breastfed because mum can't, loads of reasons why babies can't be breastfed, shouldn't we try and provide human breast milk as the alternative?
Come on, do they do that?
Yes. They have breast milk banks. They have breast milk banks that then provide the milk. Now, in the UK and the US, the only places that have this is neonatal intensive care units. Why? Because neonatal intensive care unit babies survive better with donor breast milk than they do with formula, right? Now, why, instead of allowing, formula companies are allowed to gift formula to hospitals, right? Left, right, and center. Why don't we invest in creating a human breast milk, donor breast milk network? Because there's lots of women who produce more than they need.
A lot.
And instead, we're relying on women organizing themselves through charity work to try and get this breast milk redistributed to the women who need it or to the families who need them. Adopted babies should have access to human donor breast milk. It should go maternal breast milk where possible, right? Or listen, back in the day, auntie can breastfeed.
Yeah.
If your sister's pregnant at the same time as you and she's, go for it. Then human donor breast milk, and then formula, ultra-processed cow's milk can be like maybe the last option.
Do you get in trouble when you talk about this?
Oh, yeah. I can't wait. Yeah, of course I do, yeah. It's not...
I don't understand why this makes... sometimes I feel that human beings, we have a lot of audacity sometimes to think we can do it better than nature.
Oh God, yeah.
And when you said it earlier, like you want to really appreciate the body. This system, talking about nursing, is so perfect and incredible. And by the way, if you're vain, you can always figure out the deal with your breasts later. You will be much usually thinner.
Oh yeah. So
if you nurse, so if we have to go that route, whatever it takes. But I do appreciate even opening up the conversation that if you can't make milk, maybe you could find access
to human
breast milk.
I'm not saying every woman can breastfeed, or I'm not saying every family has a mother that can breastfeed.
That's right, and that happens.
But human donor breast milk surely should be as easy to access.
Do they test it? Does it need to be tested?
It gets tested.
Okay.
So there's actually some really amazing companies as well. There's one in the UK. It's a female-founded startup called Gut Microbiome. And they have isolated, they're the first company to fully isolate the human milk microbiome. So they have found there are species of microbes that only exist in human breast milk.
Really? I feel like bodybuilders are going to get this for some reason.
God.
I don't know why.
Do you know? Like,
I don't know when you say that. It's
let's put this out there.
Long distance cyclists and bodybuilders. They're coming for this.
Whilst we're here, bovine colostrum is not needed for humans. It is for baby cows. Please. So they're doing this work, and they're actually they've created a new way of storing breast milk that maintains the breast milk microbiome. It keeps it alive. So then you have tests that sometimes they end up actually pasteurizing it, but it's still better. So this is the reason why people get really hot about this, is because sometimes it feels like this is against the mother. It's like, oh, you're telling mothers that they have to. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if we know that the human breast milk is so good for baby's health and that breastfeeding is so good for women, we should be supporting that in any way we can as a public health intervention. Not because the mothers need to do any more work. We already have so much pressure. The system needs to support that. That's what I'm saying. The system needs to change and stop trying to place the blame or the pressure on the mother alone. We didn't evolve to have like this one mother taking the entire weight of like what the baby needs to thrive. So supporting mothers is like, and it's proven when we support mothers, by the way, guess what? All of society benefits.
That's right. I think it goes back to what we said in the beginning of this conversation, even around food, which is the gathering, the connecting, the support of the extension of that story, or the start of that story is in fact supporting a mother and her having the understanding of, if I can't do it, I have help or resources or support to do that, because then the impact on that child's life forever is, we should all be concerned with that. You know, I think it's like we're all interested in everybody being as healthy as possible.
Exactly.
So in finishing up, because I could talk about this stuff forever, you did talk about bone health. I thought this was just important to highlight for teenagers that really, I mean, so much is happening in puberty.
Yes.
We know this. But also our sort of long-term bone health oftentimes is established when we're teenagers.
Yeah. So this is...
this one upsets you a little bit. What's up?
Well, the thing is with for me, adolescents and teenagers are so underserved as a population. We sort of ignore them and they're sort of troublesome. But actually we need to support this time, because the way I wrote my book, everybody should know this, is a life course approach from conception to old age, right? Or later years, I like to call it, in fact. But so
I just call it alive.
Just alive, yeah.
And born to alive until
born to
you
alive
die.
To still alive.
Yeah, I'm
exactly.
alive.
So there are windows of opportunity where there are specific changes that happen where you can like intervene and be like, this is a good time to get this right. First 1,000 days, massive. Then early childhood, for different reasons, has another opportunity. And adolescence is another big one. And adolescence, we have this final growth spurt where that extra bit of height happens. We have this enormous structural brain change that takes place that we are actively working against at the moment with our culture. So we have social media, we have peer pressure, we have examinations, poor dietary choice, interrupted sleep thanks to our devices, at a time when literally our brain structure is being overhauled. It's wild.
The shearing of, right? Like, what is it? You don't need to remember how to tie your shoe anymore. So your brain is literally shearing away all of the things it doesn't need, right? Oh.
So there's all this happening, and there's new pathways being formed that are related to your personality and mood. Okay.
I have 3 daughters. Don't even talk to me about personality and mood of teenagers. It's awesome.
Right. But we have this, and instead of saying, let's support you with the best nutrition to make sure that your brain health is excellent, let's support you with the best nutrition to make sure that the stress of the peer pressure, the stress of the exams is actually something you're going to be resilient against. We're just like, leave them to it. Anyway, so there's a really, now I got sad about this, the bone health, because what I've seen and what I've spoken to, actually, Dr. Vonda Wright, she's very passionate about this too. She's amazing.
I love her.
We had a conversation and she's in her clinical practice, and I've seen in my clinical practice, teens that are depriving themselves of food. They are chronically under eating. And again, it's interesting. It's not just thinness nowadays. It's again, fear. They don't know what to eat, right? They're paralyzed by the fear of food, and they're missing this critical window of making the most beautiful bone mineral density. And for bone mineral density to happen, you need impact and nutrition. And when we have a population of teens who are sedentary and undernourished, now it's interesting because you can be
overfed and undernourished.
Yes. So I'm not just talking about the teens that look skinny. These are teens who may be overweight. but they are lacking in nutrition.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster. And then what happens is that, you're getting people in their early 20s with osteopenia. What? We can't have that.
You can't is there really anything you can do except maintain the level that you're at if you get diagnosed with that?
Yeah. So actually we did an excellent podcast with the world specialist on the Zoe Science Nutrition podcast on this. The bone is a live tissue. So you can do more than just maintain where you're at, but you have to work at it. So it's
what if you're 65, can you?
Yeah, you can.
Great.
You can make a difference. And so it's interesting. We're talking about, you can't just eat protein and not lift heavy.
Right. So some time under tension. Under
tension, impact as well.
And impact.
Yeah.
I still try to do impact as much as 2-3 times a week, just for that reason.
For the bone. Yeah. And then the correct nutrition. Now, going, we know calcium, we know vitamin D, we know vitamin K, but going back to what we were talking about, the gut microbiome, guess what? The gut microbiome produces chemicals that communicate with the bone tissue and increase bone production and decrease bone breakdown. So there's something called the gut-bone axis, which they've shown these biochemical pathways and which messengers are giving these instructions to the bone. And guess what foods particularly support these guys?
Algae.
Green leafy veg. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Sounded.
But yeah, seaweed sounds good. So it's
you can, you know what? 80% of the time, if you say seaweed, you're going to get on the board.
It's true. Seaweed's really good. But so you can make a big difference. But this goes back to this idea of like prevention. A key part of prevention is to try and build the healthiest possible body at every phase of life. And we must remember to consider adolescents because it's actually a really good window, and to skip it and to ignore it is a disservice to a population that still needs our guidance. Yeah. Adolescents are not independent adults yet. They do need some guidance. And, people say to me, yeah, but it's really hard to get them to, and it is way harder than kids my age.
The easier thing is model it.
Yeah.
And encourage things. I feel like it's better than trying to dominate
100%
or restrict, because restrict means the minute they're out of your sight, they're doing the opposite. And it's like, hey, you don't want to be on a sports team? Okay, but what would be cool that you could get some of that impact?
Right.
Is it a trampoline? Is it, whatever?
Do you like skipping rope?
Yeah.
And it's interesting with food, we have the power to create the food environment in our homes that we'd like to see.
Yeah.
So I call this being your own health architect. You can't control what they're going to be able to access at the store down the road, unfortunately, or the amount of adverts they're going to get for these foods. Mm-hmm. But in your home, you can choose to fill the home with the foods that you would like them to access, so that when they're in your home, that's what they'll eat. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, then you are positively contributing. There was one lady who said, oh, well, that's easy for you to say, but my child just won't have his dinner and then he'll open the cupboard and eat the cookies. I'm like, but who put the cookies in the cupboard?
Yeah. My daughter's always like, there's just nothing to eat here. And I'm like, oh, perfect. There's so much food in my house. You have no idea. You can ask him. There's food all the time, cooking, real food. You're one person. And this made me, I've really been getting a new attitude about AI. Mm-hmm. And after, preparing for our conversation today, you are optimistic and you do like some ways that you think maybe AI could support us in our sort of food relationship and food education.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm optimistic as a baseline.
Yeah, I know you are.
That's just one of my character traits.
You were born that way, whatever. Congratulations to your parents.
So I might be wrong on this, but I think we have to see that some of the positives with AI already that we're seeing in nutrition is, so my mind has always been photo logging of food. This is one of the biggest issues with nutrition science, is asking people to accurately record food. Mm-hmm. It's hard. I don't like weighing my food, and it's my job. So with AI, we're able to use photo logging, and it's very accurate. So that's exciting, because that will transform the way that we do nutrition science. Because when we ask people to log their intake of food, if they're taking photos and the photo logging can accurately predict what's in there, that's a whole new game.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So that's really cool. And in terms of in medicine, I think AI has so much potential because the beauty of AI is pattern recognition and being able to spot anomalies, right? Like very simplistically. And the ability that AI has to do that with scans has been phenomenal, but also with like blood tests. So what's going to be interesting is we're moving towards a time where people are more used to screening. Mm-hmm. They will take like yearly blood tests, they will have yearly scans. And that when you're then able to take data, your data, and run AI over your data and see how your parameters have changed. Yes, it's then interesting to compare those parameters to women who are similar to you in age and everything else, but it's your changes that are going to be the best way to understand if something's different in a bad way or that we should keep an eye on. Because it's very hard to know if there's a change. If you don't track, you don't know, like if you don't have a baseline and you don't know what's normal, it's very hard to be able to predict if something's not quite right. And I think in the future with wearables and with just a more habitual data keeping of our health, AI will then be able to spot things before we would, like in an easier way and without necessarily the need for a clinician. Mm-hmm. You could have your AI, your health AI person bot could be able to spot something and be like, hey, this change is unusual for you.
Yeah.
And we've actually seen that. So some cardiologists do this with aura data. They're able to say like that they're able to use aura data to predict an AFib episode. Like it's really cool. Mm-hmm. That's going to be amazing. It's going to help healthcare providers to work more in prevention and to be ahead of the curve. So I am optimistic. Yeah.
We need to be optimistic because the alternative is unproductive, but you're also out there doing stuff. And so I think that combination and teaching people how to do it for themselves.
Yes.
So I really, really appreciate it. So can you please remind people all of the places, your books, your podcasts, that they can find you?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Federica Amati across like the social platforms. My books are Recipes for a Better Menopause and Everybody Should Know This. And you can find me on the Zoe Science and Nutrition podcast. And you can find me like, I don't know, I try to crop up on different podcasts and I try to share as much of my knowledge as I can, especially on social media. I actually have a course coming out with Imperial College Business School, their first ever nutrition course.
That's going to show them for not taking you that first time.
Well, but I think they were right because here I am doing better stuff. So this course is really aimed for an executive audience to help them create better food environments in the workplace and across business, basically. So I'm very excited. That's coming out in April.
How long is it?
Oh, it's like a 6-module. It's a lot of learning. It took me a long time to record it.
Are you mean?
No. Do you know, I think what I've tried to do with this course is create something that covers public health, medical science, nutrition, policy and environmental. So it's not a pure nutrition science course. I'm trying to bring all of my experience because it's quite multidimensional and equip them with more tools to be able to make a difference in where they can, because everyone can. Teachers can make a difference in classrooms and doctors can in clinics, and if you're a business owner you can make a difference if you're a parent. So that's what I'm hoping to do with that. So it's exciting.
I'm so glad you came all this way.
Thanks for having me. It's been so good to be here.
Well, we're going to get started. We're going to have some fun now. I'm going to put you on the red bed and the shift wave and let you just relax for a little bit.
I can't wait. I don't know what a shift wave is.
Do you get burnt out? Because you do have a smile and an easygoingness, but you have a full schedule and a family.
Yeah, so I do.
Do you ever go in the bathroom and cry or just stay there extra long?
No.
You ever hid in your bathroom?
Hid in my bathroom?
Yeah. Like they're all outside.
Do you know, I haven't hid in my bathroom. I think my problem, Gabby, is that I love my job to a fault. I love what I do. I can't get enough. So actually, for me, it's like, I love my job. I love what I do. I love my family. I love my children. They are my favorite thing in the world. And I love my husband too, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's for me, it's like there's not enough hours in the day.
Yeah.
So when I get burnt out, it's more that I just have to cancel everything.
Say no.
So I don't cry or go to the bathroom. I just literally go, yeah, no, I'm not doing today. So I'm going to just, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And then I go back to the simple stuff. I take my dog for a walk. I cook a meal that takes more than 5 minutes to make. And I wash my hair. And I pick up the kids from school and bring them home and have a chat. So it does happen where I get to the point where no, it's too much. Like I've said yes, I say yes to, yes, I want to help with that. Yes, I want to help with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to come and talk to these guys. So, but I try my best not to do that too much. So I try and be, I've learned that saying no doesn't mean I don't care.
No.
It just means that I care about me as well.
Yeah, you're in it for the long run.
Yeah.
We call that the long game.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. So true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for spending some time with me. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you did, feel free to share it with your friends. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And also, I want to hear from you. Tell me what's working, what's resonating with you, and how you're getting it done. Keep going.